Cold is not an object. It is not a substance you can touch or hold. Cold is an absence. It is the vacuum left behind when energy flees. And 25,000 years ago, that vacuum was the dominant force on planet Earth. We are standing on the Mammoth steppe. The location is present-day Ukraine, but the time is the last glacial maximum. The global thermostat has plummeted. The massive ice sheets of the north have sucked the moisture from the air, creating a dry, frozen desert that stretches from the Atlantic coast of Portugal all the way to the Bering Strait. The ambient air temperature is minus 35 degrees Celsius. But the wind is a physical assault. It strips the boundary layer of heat from your body in seconds. Let us analyze the physiology of a human being standing in this landscape without shelter. You are a tropical machine. Your evolutionary blueprints were drawn in the Great Rift Valley of Africa. Your optimal operating temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. You are a furnace designed to dissipate heat, not retain it. In the first 60 seconds of exposure, your body realizes it is dying. The hypothalamus triggers a violent emergency protocol called vasoconstriction. The blood vessels in your fingers, toes, ears, and nose clamp shut. Your body makes a calculated sacrifice. It will abandon your extremities to keep the heart and brain alive. Your hands turn white. Then blue. Then black. Within 20 minutes, dexterity vanishes. You cannot tie a knot. You cannot strike a flint. You cannot hold a spear. Within an hour, the fluid inside your cells begins to freeze. Sharp ice crystals form within the cytoplasm, rupturing the cell walls from the inside out. This is not sleep. This is necrosis. And yet, here they are. Our ancestors. They are walking into the teeth of the most brutal winter in geologic history. They are not fleeing south to the Mediterranean. They are pushing north. They are colonizing the ice. How? To survive here, you need fire. Fire is the external stomach that digests your food. Fire is the artificial sun that keeps the blood flowing. But fire requires fuel. And looking at this landscape, you see the great paradox of the Paleolithic. There is no wood. There are no forests here. The trees died out thousands of years ago, choked by the cold and the dryness. So, what do they burn? They burned the only resource the landscape provided. They burned the giants. This is the story of an engineering feat so gruesome and so brilliant that it defies modern logic. This is the story of how humanity turned the skeletons of the dead into the fire of life. For generations, we have insulted the past. When Victorian archaeologists first discovered the tools of the Ice Age, they projected their own prejudices onto the people who made them. They called them primitives. They imagined the caveman as a helpless scavenger, shivering in the dark, huddled in a damp hole, waiting for the storm to pass. This image is a lie. If the people of the Gravettian culture, the mammoth hunters of 25,000 years ago, were that helpless, they would have gone extinct in a single winter. You cannot luck your way through an ice age. The caloric math simply doesn't add up. To survive in minus 40 degrees, a human body burns roughly 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day just to maintain body temperature. That is 3 times the requirement of a modern office worker. You cannot sustain that energy by scavenging berries or hiding in a cave. These people were not surviving, they were dominating. They were apex predators who engineered their environment. They looked at the desolate tundra and they didn't see emptiness. They saw a chemical reservoir. They understood that while the sun was too weak to grow trees, it was strong enough to grow grass. And that grass was eaten by the megafauna. The mammoth. The bison. The reindeer. To the modern eye, this is an animal. To the Ice Age engineer, this was a mobile battery unit. A mammoth is a walking storage tank of solar energy, converted into fat, muscle, and bone. The challenge was, how do you unlock that energy? How do you take a pile of wet bones and turn it into a furnace? The evidence for this technology remained hidden for 20 millennia, buried beneath the loess soil of Eastern Europe. In 1965, in the village of Mazirik, a farmer digging a cellar struck a hard, white object. He thought he had found a buried cow. He kept digging. He found another. And another. And then, a skull. When Soviet paleontologists arrived, they realized this was not a random pile of death. It was a construction site. They uncovered 4 massive, circular dwellings. But these weren't tents. They were bone castles. The walls were built from the mandibles, the jawbones, of woolly mammoths, stacked in a precise, interlocking herringbone pattern to maximize insulation and structural integrity. One single dwelling utilized the remains of 95 mammoths. Think about that. That is over 15 tons of bone. This proves 2 things. First, these people were master builders. Second, they had access to an almost unlimited supply of carcasses. But the smoking gun, literally, was found in the center of the hut. The hearths. When researchers analyzed the chemical composition of the ash in the fire pits, they didn't find the chemical signature of wood charcoal. They didn't find pine. They didn't find oak. They found the spectral signature of hydroxyapatite and carbonized collagen. They were burning the bones. At sites across the Russian plain and the Czech Republic, the pattern is identical. Huge pits filled with burnt bone ash. This was not a desperate measure for a single night. This was their industrial standard. For 5,000 years, civilization in this region ran on bone power. But here is the engineering problem. He holds up the wood. Wood is easy. It contains cellulose and lignin. You apply heat, it releases gas, the gas catches fire. Simple. He holds up the bone. This is a rock. It is 50% inorganic mineral. Calcium phosphate. It doesn't burn. If you throw a dry steak bone into a fire, it just chars and smells bad. It doesn't produce a flame. So how did they do it? The secret lies in the anatomy. Our ancestors knew that not all bones are created equal. They weren't gathering old, dry bones from the surface. They were harvesting green bone. Inside the hard outer shell of a fresh mammoth femur, there is a honeycomb structure called cancellous bone. In a living animal, this honeycomb is filled with marrow. Marrow is fat. Pure, concentrated animal fat. Chemically, it is a hydrocarbon, very similar to the paraffin wax in a candle or the kerosene in a heater. The bone matrix itself isn't the fuel. The bone is the wick. The mineral structure holds the fat in place, allowing it to liquefy and vaporize slowly. But there is a catch. Bone has high thermal inertia. You can't light a bone with a spark. You need a catalyst. You need a starter fuel to reach the ignition temperature of the fat. In the treeless steppe, what catches a spark? Dung. Dried bison or mammoth dung is essentially processed grass. It is pure fiber. It lights easily and smolders with a steady heat. The archaeological record shows that the fires were started with dung and dwarf willow scrub. Once a bed of coals was established, reaching about 500 degrees Celsius, the engineering began. You don't throw the whole bone in. You smash it. You had to expose the surface area of the marrow. You place the greasy, shattered shards onto the dung coals. And then, alchemy. The fat renders. It drips onto the coals. It gasifies. And it ignites. A bone fire is not like a wood fire. It doesn't crackle and pop. It hisses. It burns with a mesmerizing, steady, yellow flame. And unlike wood, which burns fast, bone is dense. It acts like coal. It acts like coal. It retains heat for hours. A well-built mammoth bone fire radiates a massive amount of infrared energy, turning a skin tent into a sauna. But the story doesn't end on the steppe. As humans pushed further north, crossing the land bridge into the Americas and settling the high Arctic, they faced an even harsher reality. Here, there are no mammoths. Here, there isn't even dwarf willow. Here, on the sea ice, the engineering had to evolve from solid fuel to liquid fuel. Enter the cudlick, also known as the kullik. To the untrained eye, it looks like a simple stone bowl. In reality, it is a masterpiece of hydrodynamic engineering. The fuel here is not marrow. It is blubber. Seal or whale fat. But if you hold a match to a chunk of blubber, it will just melt. It won't burn. The genius of the Inuit was the invention of the wick. They used moss or cotton grass, dried and rolled between the fingers. They arranged this wick along the straight edge of the soapstone lamp. The physics at play here is capillary action. The wick draws the liquefied fat up against gravity, increasing the surface area by 1,000 times. This allows the oxygen to mix with the vaporized oil. A master keeper of the cudlick can trim the wick with a specialized stick, adjusting the flame so perfectly that it produces no smoke, only pure light and heat. This single stone lamp was the stove that cooked the meat. It was the heater that dried the wet fur boots. It was the light that kept the madness of the 24-hour winter night at bay. It was a closed-loop energy system, derived entirely from the hunt. We must stop looking at these technologies as mere survival mechanics. We need to understand the human experience. Close your eyes and imagine the smell. A wood fire smells like pine, sharp and clean. A bone fire smells organic. It smells heavy, greasy, savory. It smells like life. For 5,000 years, this was the scent of safety. This reliance on animal fuel fundamentally changed the social structure of humanity. In a forest, fuel is democratic. A child can pick up a stick. Anyone can build a fire. But on the tundra, fuel is the result of violence. Fuel is the result of the hunt. You cannot have warmth unless the hunters succeed. This created a profound interdependence. The warmth of the infant in the cradle was directly tied to the courage of the spear thrower on the ice. It also created a spiritual bond with the animal that we can scarcely imagine today. The mammoth was not just food. It was the walls of the home. It was the tools in the hand. It was the clothes on the back. And, in the final act of transmutation, it was the light in the darkness. Is it any wonder that the art of this era is so obsessed with these beasts? They were not worshipping gods in the sky. They were worshipping the providers on the earth. They were paying tribute to the source of their heat. Eventually, the climate turned. The great summer came. The glaciers retreated. The forests marched back north. The mammoths vanished, and with them, the bone fires went out. We returned to burning wood. Then coal. Then oil. We forgot the chemistry of the bone. But the legacy of the bone fire remains. It teaches us the defining characteristic of our species. We are not specialists. We are generalists. A polar bear is designed for the ice. If you move it to the desert, it dies. A human is designed for the tropics. If you move it to the ice, it invents a way to stay tropical. We don't just find niches in the environment. We create them. The people of the Mammoth Steppe didn't look at the lack of trees and see a death sentence. They looked at the problem, analyzed the available chemistry, and engineered a solution. They proved that there is no such thing as a resource-poor environment. There is only a lack of imagination. We conquered the cold because we realized that the heat of the sun was trapped in the grass, eaten by the mammoth, stored in the marrow, and released by the human hand. We are the alchemists of the Ice Age. But fire is stationary. It warms the home, but it cannot warm the traveler. You can build the hottest fire in history, but if you step away from it for 10 minutes in a blizzard to hunt, you will freeze. To conquer the world, we needed to take the fire with us. We needed a second skin. How did we invent the technology to stitch waterproof clothing that rivals modern Gore-Tex? The answer involves a tool so small you could lose it in the snow, yet it is arguably more important than the wheel.